You are Locked On Wolves POSTCAST, part of Locked On Minnesota on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Another inexcusable loss for the T-Wolves tonight, this time to the 17-51 Pelicans. Final score tonight, 119-115. What's going on back in the lab? Back at it, another T-Wolves postcast episode right here on the Locked On Sports Minnesota Network. Your team every day. Jack Borman with me as always. Give him a follow on X at Jared Borman13. Jack, I'm glad I wasn't at the Target Center tonight, but I am jealous that you got to see a healthy Zion Williamson up close and personal. Where does that dude rank as far as like physical freaks go in the NBA? That size, speed, explosiveness combination, it's just sick, man. It's just off the charts.
Number one by a mile. I think he's
Wow.
the guy that I have gained the most respect for watching in person over the course of my career covering games, live, just because his blend of size, strength, and athleticism is completely unmatched in today's NBA.
With the NFL draft coming up, if he would have played football, what position do you think he would thrive at? Seeing him up close and personal, his body size and that explosiveness, I just top of my head, I think tight end. But you tell me, what do you think?
I was sitting next to Mark Rosen tonight. We were talking a little football
Rosie.
during some TV timeouts, and I looked at him. I said, I think this guy could be a Hall of Fame pass rusher if he wanted to be it. Like 6'6", 275. He's
just a
crazy.
Freak. Just a freak. All right, lots to get into, including why the Wolves just can't find a way to win these clutch time games this year. But first, quick reminder, tonight's episode brought to us by Game Time. Game Time, download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. All right, so Wolves trying to bounce back after that. It was just a gut punch loss to the Pacers. Zion in town. He had 29, and half of those 29 points, Jack, it felt like a highlight reel bucket. Wolves go on an 11-2 run in the first quarter, though. They got up as many as 14, and at that point early in the game, it kind of felt like things were about to go on cruise control. Pels rally back, though. We go into halftime down 1, 61-60. Fourth quarter, going into the fourth, down 5. Couple minutes left. I'll just fast forward there. And has a chance to tie it. He can't. Naz Reid has a wide open three in the next possession in the corner. Can't hit that. And the Wolves come up short, man. Again, just back-to-back inexcusable losses, both at home, by the way. They dropped to 9 games above 500 now, 40-31. So big picture, Jack, let's just start here. Stats don't lie. They've lost 31 games this year. 25 of those 31 games have been clutch time games, most in the NBA. Is this a team come playoff time that can find a way to start winning close games? And what do you think is like the missing link right now that they've got to find to add to their formula?
Yeah, I frankly, I don't know. It's just pretty confounding that I think that this team has found ways to lose games tonight. A huge part of the reason why they lost this game was because they could not, for the life of them, get an offensive rebound in the fourth quarter when the Pelicans missed a shot. Pelicans had 6 offensive rebounds for 6 second chance points in the fourth quarter. And they just had no answer for Zion Williamson was part of the equation too. I feel like, the offense certainly has been the most consistent theme, I think, throughout the season in terms of those clutch time losses. But tonight I just thought that it was more so the fact that they just had zero answer for the most physically dominant player that I have seen since prime Shaq or prime Dwight Howard in Zion. And man, what he was able to do getting downhill was no joke. And the Pelicans, I think, are just an awful matchup for this Timberwolves team. And we've seen it throughout the years with Zion. The Wolves just not really having a perfect one-to-one guy to guard him. But yeah, I mean, bigger picture, it's really tough considering that, this is the easiest part of the Timberwolves schedule. And other teams above them just keep winning. And now not only are they, struggling to try to get out of the play-in line, but, they're in danger of not even hosting the 7-8 play-in game, because the Clippers are right on their heels and they just got Norm Powell back. And James Harden and Ivica Zubac are playing really well, and Kawhi Leonard is still healthy and playing. So just really ill-advised time to have a 2-game losing streak. And what was a bummer too, I was not here the other night, but there was very little energy in the arena tonight. And it felt like every single time that the Timberwolves were able to generate some energy, I was taking some notes of, mark this down for a potential turning point. Like they just shot themselves in the foot. And that was the biggest thing tonight. It just really felt like Timberwolves just beat themselves more so than anything. And I think that's got to be really frustrating for certainly a lot of the people in here. And it was evidently and audibly frustrating for, all the fans here at Target Center tonight.
Time to reveal where the game was won or lost. It's the turning point.
Down 1 going into halftime. Third quarter, again, had an opportunity. Ant, I thought, did some good things. Maybe it was more of a Finchy adjustment, but I like the way they used him. Still ended up losing the quarter, though, by 4 points. What was the turning point for you tonight here, Jack, in this one?
Yeah, we're gonna stick in that third quarter, and it was kind of around the 3-minute mark of the third quarter. So take you back there, just give you kind of a lay of the land. This is when things are, really, really back and forth throughout this point of the game. Both teams are kind of in that free throw fest that we had in that third quarter. And then, Dante DiVincenzo makes a really important 3-pointer. And then Nickeil Alexander-Walker draws an offensive foul on a moving screen, kind of one of those Mike Conley, time it up perfectly, help the crowd kind of get into it. And the crowd was really into it at this point. And then Julius Randle was trying to set an off-ball screen for Dante DiVincenzo and just kind of ran into Jordan Hawkins. And Chris Finch, the Wolves had all the momentum at this point. Chris Finch then, very loudly screams the F word and calls a timeout. The arena was like dead silent. Everybody could hear him. And then he calls a timeout. And the Wolves, from there, I just thought that was a huge missed opportunity, because from there on in, after Randall has that at the, the 2:57 mark of that fourth quarter, the Pelicans then, went from being down to up 5 at the end of the quarter. So the last 3 minutes, went on a nice little run there. And that was just the biggest problem for the Wolves, is just, like I said earlier, every time it felt like they were getting a little bit of momentum, they just struggled to hold on to it. And you could look at anything in the fourth quarter too. There were plenty of back and forth, turning point type moments, but that just, to me, really felt like when the Wolves were kind of playing some of their best basketball in the game, despite, having it being that turnover fest. It felt like, okay, they got to pull out of this somehow. And they finally strung, 3 or 4 good possessions together, and then just kind of let all the air out of the balloon with that moment.
Yeah, well said there. Plenty more deep dive from this one. Some team stats that really stuck out, including too many turnovers, too many ugly turnovers, as you mentioned, Jack. That's all coming up right after this. Quick reminder, tonight's episode brought to us by FanDuel. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, an official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Right now, FanDuel's giving you a chance at a huge return, $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed when you win your first $5 wager. Why I love FanDuel? When you get the hunch in the middle of the game, you can go check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. Again, $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed when you hit your first $5 bet. Go check it all out over at FanDuel.com. Get on some NBA future action while you're there. Naz Reid, 6 Man of the Year odds, still at 4-1. It's all sitting up over at FanDuel.com. Again, check it all out over at FanDuel.com and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you win your first $5 wager. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, an official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, a little bit more deeper dive here, Jack. Before we get into the ugly stats like the turnovers, can you find me some sort of positive here? Some sort of glass half full stat, whatever it may be. Maybe it's not a stat. Maybe it's a specific player performance tonight. What positive takeaway is there to be had from this one as you assess this team? With just a few weeks to play here, both big picture, I guess, and what you saw from tonight specifically.
Yeah, I think that kind of all can boil into one thing here. I think, for me, it was the way that the Timberwolves were able to get to the free throw line. I mean, they won 36-22 in terms of free throw attempts. It's a fantastic number to be at there. And Anthony Edwards specifically, coming off a game where he set his career high for free throws made and free throws attempted in a game with 19 and 20 respectively against Indiana. He has 15 free throws made on 17 free throw attempts. That's absolutely fantastic. He had half the Timberwolves free throw attempts tonight. He made more free throws than the entire Pelicans team did. And I just really like the way that Ant has been getting downhill. I think we've seen it from Ant in these little spurts now. There was a spurt about a month ago, maybe 6 weeks ago, where Ant had those 3 games in a row where he had, I think, double-digit free throw makes, and then just kind of went back to shooting a ton of threes and was playing really well, which is fine. But I do think that there's kind of an edge that the Timberwolves team has when Ant's able to get downhill and play in the paint and is able to kind of get past the first line of the defense, because when he's got to see a second and a third defender on the back line, I think it just creates so many open guys in the corners or in the slots, and Ant's getting better at being able to make those passes and create good open 3-point shot attempts. So I think that's something that is continued to be a positive for the Timberwolves, and I think by and large, the more that they're able to get into the bonus earlier on in these quarters, I think they've been a really solid team in terms of being able to draw non-shooting fouls that, then lead to free throws because they're in the bonus. And, NBA offensive rating skyrockets when a team is in the bonus, just in general, because teams don't want to give up free throws. So they'd rather just give up, more open shot looks and don't offer quite as much resistance inside. So I think, Ant's been really important in that. And Julius, to his credit, has been very important in that. Was not as much tonight. Nikhil kind of took over for him with 7 free throw attempts, but yeah, by and large, that's been really positive for the Timberwolves, and is something that I really hope that they can continue to find. But another thing too, kind of along that same vein with Ant, I really liked the way that they used Ant in that third quarter, especially earlier on in that third quarter, where the Pelicans were totally sagging off just about everybody in that first half, and were trying to clog the paint as much as they could and show bodies, just boxes and elbows on Ant. And Ant really struggled to just kind of get anything going. He was, I think, 1 of 3 or 1 of 4 from 3. He was 1 of 4, 1 of 5 from 2 in that first half, and got most of his work done from the free throw line. And then in that third quarter, Chris Finch and his staff did a good job of putting Ant more off the ball, and had Ant coming off of, staggered pin downs and, things like that, some Chicago actions where it's a pin down that flows into a ball screen or a dribble handoff. And that was something that was pretty fruitful for Ant. He made a couple of threes early in that third quarter, and then obviously drew that shooting foul on Zion. That was a 3-pointer. So he made all 3 of those free throws. And I just really liked that process in general. I think then when you're able to get the ball to Ant on the move, it's harder for defenses to load up on him because they don't necessarily know where they need to load up from, because they're running him all over the floor. And so I think the more that the Timberwolves can do that, the more that they're going to be able to be successful. And that's something too that they can run on the backside when they're, have an empty side pick and roll with Mike and Rudy that they're running. So, again, it just needs to be a little bit more diversified in the way that they're using Ant, because I think in the fourth quarter you saw when he's just got the ball in his hands, he's dribbling the air out of the ball. There's just not a whole lot of good things that happen, because the reality of the matter is that if you want to go, I don't have them in front of me right now, but the last time I checked, Ant was like a very average isolation player, even below average for parts of the season in terms of how many points per isolation he scores. And when you look at a lot of the other elite players in the league, namely a guy like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is probably the only perimeter player in the West who's like definitively better than him. And I guess Luka now too, now that he, or I guess still in the West, but both those guys are way better than Ant in isolation and way better at kind of collapsing the defense with the ball in their hands. And so I think the more that the Timberwolves can help Ant and make it easier for him, instead of having, putting him in positions where he can be his own biggest enemy, I guess, I think is just something that's got to happen. And that's, part that I think everyone kind of has a hand in that. I think, some of his teammates on the floor, I mean, Mike Conley's a veteran, Rudy's a veteran, Randall's a veteran, DiVincenzo's a veteran. I mean, Naz and Jaden have been playing in this league for a long time. And so I think there's just some accountability that's got to happen just with all those guys, because, Ant is a wonderful talent and he's super unselfish for a superstar. And I think, he really respects all of his teammates and all of his coaches. And I think, if it was Mike that was saying like, hey man, let's, try to get you in the corner more so we can run something to get you with, get the ball to you when you're on the move and it's easier for you that way, I think Ant would be super receptive of that. And, and, to the Timberwolves coaching staff's credit, they went to it. And then, I don't know what the pie chart or the blame pie chart is with, is it Ant's fault? Is it Mike's fault for not calling something? Is it Finch's fault? It's just hard to, assess exactly who deserves what there, but it's a problem. And the Timberwolves have shown they can fix it for stretches. It's just, can they go to it for a little longer than
do
just
it consistently?
Yeah. Or maybe, is trying to play more through Dante or Mike or Julius, later on and get the ball to Ant on the second side, something that they try to do in the fourth quarter. Because again, I understand the political hierarchy of like Ant's the best player by far on this team and you want to play through him, but there's other ways to play through a guy when the ball's not in his hands to start an action.
Yeah.
So
you in over an 82 game season too, you got to be able to find some balance and switch it up once in a while and show other teams, just prove that you can win in other ways. Otherwise they will figure out a way to stop that and then just literally let you bleed it out until you eventually evolve a little bit and change. So yeah, I like what you said about maybe getting DDV especially some more opportunities late in those games. Real quick here before we go to segment 3 and talk about this rematch round 2 preview on Friday night. Some team stats here, just real quick. The turnovers, Jack, the turnovers earlier in the year, first half of the season, were so frustrating to watch. Then for a while there, especially on that 8-game win streak and even prior to that, felt like they really cleaned up the turnovers quite a bit. Tonight, though, that third quarter, 9 turnovers alone in that third quarter. They go into halftime down 61-60. They lose the third quarter 34-30. They lose the third quarter by 4 points. They had 9 turnovers for 13 points in that third quarter alone. I don't know where that ranks, but that has to be one of the worst quarters turnover-wise they've had all year.
Yeah, second worst turnover quarter of the year for the Wolves. I think
I knew you'd have that stat up, by the way. I knew you'd
might remember that third quarter in Oklahoma City where OKC just totally flipped a switch and just absolutely put the screws to the Wolves, and they turned it over 11 times in that quarter. But unlike that quarter, a lot of the turnovers in tonight's third quarter were super unforced or just careless passes or just, trying to make passes where guys just weren't, and maybe being a little too ambitious in transition. And again, the Pelicans have been all season one of the worst teams on both sides of the turnover ledger in terms of they do an awful job of taking care of the ball and they don't turn other teams over very much. And in the last 5 games for the Pelicans, again, the Pelicans lost 7 of their last 8 and just lost their most recent game by like 45 points. And in the last 5 games, the Pelicans been dead last in points off turnover differential. They're giving up almost 9 points in that differential per game, but the Pelicans were +3 tonight. And
that's a recipe for disaster. Yeah, right
totally.
Totally.
And no question. And I think something that's been brewing a little bit for the Wolves, they haven't done a very good job in terms of converting opponent turnovers into points of late, just in terms of like how many points per turnover are they scoring. That number has been, a lot closer to 1 when it should be a lot closer to 1.5 or even 1.6 or 1.7. And so that's been problematic for the Wolves, as was their finishing inside tonight. The Timberwolves shot just 45% at the rim, 9 of 20, well below the league average of about 67%. And I just thought the Wolves shot selection too for good stretches of the night was really poor. Took a lot of, really tough contested 2s in the paint, and then took some really early shot clock 3s with very little ball movement that were, sidestep or falling away shots that, I think the Timberwolves were just trying to kind of cut make up the entire deficit with one shot. And
The
that's just
home
not
run
a
ball.
good thing.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it's just not a good thing to do, because I think it just breathes confidence into a team that, even though they had two somewhat stars, Zion's obviously a megastar, but CJ McCollum's still a very skilled player. And if you give those two guys enough space and enough opportunity to do well and kind of drag the other guys along with them, all these guys are pros, and they're talented enough to make you pay. And that's certainly what happened tonight.
100%. Well said. Couple minutes left. Let's talk about this Pelicans rematch now, Friday night, and then we'll wrap up with what we'll be talking about. That's all coming up right after this.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the bracket breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
All right, Jack. The rematch, man. I mean, round two. Well, first of all, what's an adjustment or tweak, I guess, you're looking for? Or maybe something, again, we've talked about a lot of things that surprised us tonight, right? But, what is the easy fix, I guess, in such a short time span, in 48 hours, I guess, to go up against the same team? How do you rebound? What is Finch talking about tomorrow at practice?
He's probably trying to get Kyle Anderson on a PJ from Miami to get him to come guard Zion, because he's been very good against Zion the last couple of years. But yeah, I think the Timberwolves just have to do a better job of building the wall against Zion. I thought that, Jaden McDaniels did not play very much tonight, and I was confused by why. I understand that, I really don't understand why.
Maybe you don't understand, actually. You're a little choked up there. Yeah.
I was going to say, I understand why they didn't want to put Jaden on Zion just because of how thin he is, but I don't understand why they didn't try to have Jaden play with Julius and Rudy, just from a defensive perspective, because, if you're going to put Naz out there, Naz wasn't, super impactful on the offensive end of the floor. He was only 2 of 7 from 3. So it's not like he was just on fire and they needed him out there. But I would have liked to see, Randall on Zion and then just kind of feeding him into, help and rim protection with McDaniels and Gobert at the rim. I think that that's a much better option than having Naz Reid in there instead of Jaden, who is, and Naz has really struggled on defense, especially protecting the rim over the last few games. And so that's just a tweak that I would maybe try to change, because Jaden McDaniels, he's one of the best on-ball defenders in the NBA. Yeah. But I think he's a better rim protector than he is on-ball defender. And that's quite the hat tip to what he's able to do on both on and off the ball. And so that's something that I would like to see more. And then I was really surprised that they didn't try to play more through Jaden McDaniels, because he was being guarded by CJ McCollum and Kelly Olynyk. He can blow by both of those guys, and he can rise and elevate over CJ McCollum if he's on Jaden. So that's something that I would like to see more of. And then I would also like to continue to see the Timberwolves play through Mike Conley more. I think that Mike Conley has been fantastic in some of these games where he's been more aggressive. And I thought the way that he was, very eager to take 3-point shots when he had any sliver of daylight was awesome. And then, was also effective kind of getting downhill in that empty side pick and roll that they got to a couple of different times. So that's what I'd like to see more of. And then, I'd like to see Julius Randle take a lot better care of the ball. Having 6 turnovers to 3 assists is not going to get the job done. No other Timberwolf had more than 2. So if Julius can just kind of put this one behind him and get back to, being the terrific playmaker that he's been really since he's come back, will be a huge thing for the Wolves coming back here on Friday night.
This is what you'll be talking about.
What's everybody going to be talking about now after this one, Jack? What's the water cooler talk, I guess, tomorrow after another frustrating loss?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the Timberwolves, it's which version of the Timberwolves do we believe is going to show up more over the course of the last 2 weeks of the season, 2-3 weeks of the regular season. The Timberwolves are 24-19 against teams 500 or above. That's a win percentage of 56%. They are now 16-12 versus teams below 500. A win percentage of 57%. So it doesn't really matter who they play. They win about 56, 57% of their games, regardless of who's in front of them. And they now have 7 losses against teams that are not in the playoff or play-in conversation, which is really bad and something that they were really good at last year. They totally took care of business against those teams. And if you look at every other team in the table right now, from the Thunder all the way through the Clippers, now the top 7 teams, the Wolves have dropped to the 8th spot. The next team there is the Lakers. They're 21-9 against teams 500 or below. So every other team that's above them in the standings right now is winning at least 2/3, but a lot more often closer to like 75 or 80% of their games against teams that are below 500. But what's interesting is the Wolves are right there at the very top of the West, behind OKC. They're right there with the Thunder, they're right there with the Warriors and the Nuggets. Those 3 teams, Warriors, Nuggets, Wolves, all have at least 24 or 25 wins against teams above 500. So it's just really confusing. Is this kind of something that we don't really talk about because the Wolves get out of the plane and then are able to beat whoever they play? Let's say they're the Wolves end up being the 7 seed. They get through the plane, they win the 7-8 game, they're the 7 seed. Let's say they play Denver in that round 1 matchup and they beat Denver again. We're not going to be talking about this. So it's just really hard to understand, which version of the team to believe in, because we've seen both of them for extended stretches, and it seems like a switch that can be flipped just on and off. And it's certainly not encouraging that we've seen about equal sides of both of them, and not enough of the Timberwolves team that's been really, really good against good teams this year. So that's
as frustrating as it is here, Jack, as frustrating as these losses are, to be fair, I mean, when you really think about that, you're going to play the best teams in the playoffs. So in theory, again, they should have more than a fighter's chance, because to your point, again, they clearly have shown they can beat anybody on any given night. To our credit, though, it's only fair for us not to trust this team, because they don't do it consistently and because they do lose to such bad teams in between those tough matchups. So, yeah, that's where it's tough, man. But we'll see how it all shakes out, obviously. Obviously, what seeding they get, that's obviously going to have a lot to do with it. But yeah, how many games we got here left, Jack? I always ask you, I feel like every night. But what are we down to, 11, 12, 13? 12 games left here, Jack. Yep. All right, let's get out of here. Wolves drop another clutch time game as they lose back-to-back heartbreakers, man. Pacers on Monday night, now the Pels. Final score versus Zion tonight, 119-115. 40-31 now on the year, so 9 games above 500. As always, though, huge shout-out to all the everydayers out there that always make us their first listen. All you guys coming in the chat with us from game to game. Make sure you like, make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. Go follow Jack, at Borman13, live from the Target Center. More home games than not. Jack, got to have my bracket in tomorrow morning. You got any sneaky sleeper picks for me? Can you at least maybe share with us who your championship team is? I mean, you got anything for us as we scramble to fill out these brackets last second?
Luke, I have watched 0 college basketball games.
Oh, you're going to downplay it. Okay. You're the guy who wins it. You're the guy who says, I haven't watched any basketball this year, and then you win it. You take home the money.
I have not watched a single college basketball game this season. Hey, I'm doing the best I can to be the best I can in this show. So I watch a ton of NBA games when the Wolves are not playing.
Fair enough. Pelicans rematch Friday night, 7 p.m. tip. We'll catch you right here, same time, same place. But until then, signing off.